So today I'm going to be showing you how to give a quick service to a Yamaha 2 horsepower or the Yamaha Malta. So for this video, a couple things you'll need: some spray carb cleaner. I'm using a quick Barco tool set, some flatheads and crosshead screwdrivers, some paper towel and gloves as well. So we're going to start with just removing the top 2 bolts, and there's also 2 more underneath. For this I'm just going to be using a 10mm ratchet wrench. I just use a socket wrench for most things. Just put these in a tray so you don't lose them. So now you're just going to lift the access cover, and you'll see there's 2 small screws on each side that we're going to undo. This removes the front guard. So just be careful removing these, you don't lose the screws, and the small metal clip which attaches to the metal on each side. There's one on each side of the engine for this. These are the 2 screws underneath, same size wrench, socket, and just be careful removing them, you don't drop them on the ground. So once you have that removed, it's time to remove the throttle cable. Just use a crosshead screwdriver and make sure you screw it back in so the screw doesn't fall out. Now remove the air filter with the socket wrench. There's 2 long screws and they go all the way through the carb and attach the carb, air filter and assembly to the engine. Remove the fuel line, just take off the clip, and you might have to make sure the fuel tank is empty so that it doesn't spill onto the floor. Pull out the second screw and you'll find the carburettor is now removable from the engine. Take the fuel line off and crimp it if there's fuel in the tank. So just take note of the gasket so that it doesn't go on the wrong way around. And to start with, just going to clean the outside. We're going to remove these 4 screws on the bottom to get access to the inside of the carburettor bowl. Make sure you put all the screws in a tray so you don't lose them. So gently remove the bowl from the bottom of the carburettor and you'll see the float assembly. Have a look in the bottom of the bowl if there's any dirt or grease or build-up of residue. That's going to be cleaned out. Also take note of the seal, make sure that it's not damaged. If it's split or cracked, it might need replacing. So just a bit of carb spray in there and a wipe. It should remove any particles. If it's badly contaminated, you might have to clean it with a brush. Now we're just going to remove the side filter intake. 4 screws out again. Make sure you put these in a separate container so you don't mix up your screws. You don't need to completely break this whole assembly down, just check for dirt. There are some fine gaskets there, and if you remove them you'll have to replace them, so just give everything a spray with the carb cleaner and make sure it's running smoothly. If it looks good and it looks clean, it'll probably run just fine, so don't remove the gaskets unless they're damaged or they're very dirty. Just put the screws back in and hand tighten. Remember, everything's aluminium so it can easily be stripped. So coming to the float assembly, first of all just make sure it is working and moving and that the needle valve is moving in and out on the inside attached to the float. We're going to remove the float now and spray some carb cleaner into the needle valve hole. So just gently remove it, watch out for the pin, it will fall out. And into this hole, that's where we're going to be spraying the carb cleaner. This is the main inlet jet for fuel into the carburettor bowl. Give that a few sprays and remove the small rubber plug. Start removing the main jet. Carburettor spray through the jet, make sure it's coming out the other side. Once that's clean, a bit more into the main hole. Screw the jet back in, make sure you're using the same orientation. Inside the other hole is another jet. Make sure you give this a clean also. Into the main carburettor. And into the valve. Reassemble the same direction as you took it out. A bit into the entrance, just make sure there's no dirt or grime build up and everything's moving freely, the choke and the throttle. Now we're just going to remove the side plate and make sure there's no dirt inside this valve hole. There is a small metal bung, you can remove that. Spray some carb cleaner in and just make sure there's no extra dirt. If you find the carburettor is very dirty and a lot of the valves look like they could do with further cleaning, it was a good idea to put the whole carburettor into an ultrasonic bath, but this one was quite clean so it was fine. Don't forget to put the rubber plug back in, otherwise it will run badly. Reassembling the float, just make sure the needle valve is in place. Then fit the axle pinion. This is quite delicate, so be careful. The whole assembly, you want to make sure that it still works after screwing the pin in. Gently tighten. Make sure the assembly is still working and the needle valves moving in and out with the float. Gently place the seal back on and prepare to screw in the 4 screws that hold the bowl on. Put the gasket back on the same orientation. Quick clean of the air filter, make sure it's not too greasy or covered in fuel. Now for assembly back to the engine, put the pins through the air filter first, and then you can slot the carburettor onto the air filter and then fit that to the engine. I find this is the easiest way to reassemble the engine. Make sure they slot all the way through, holding the gasket in place, otherwise the gasket can drop out onto the floor when refitting the carburettor. Gently fit it back in place and start to hand tighten. Remember, you're screwing into aluminium with stainless steel, so don't over tighten any of the bolts because it's easily stripped. Reassemble your throttle cable. This might need to be adjusted later on. And now reassemble the fuel tubing. Gently place it on and remember to put the clip back on to hold it in place. Don't forget to reassemble the choke lever. This can be a little fiddly, but just make sure you slot it into place and slide it on from the side. You'll know once it's on, it should be quite a satisfying click, and just move it back and forward to make sure that it still works. Reassemble the top 2 screws. Don't forget to give the bottom a bit of a clean. This isn't the easiest time to clean it while it's off. The carburettor spray is good at removing any dirt or grease. Now put the bottom 2 screws on first. Don't over tighten these. And now put the clips back on the sides. These can be quite fiddly to replace and remove. Once that's reassembled, click the hood on and you should be ready to go. Thanks for watching.